Science for Quarter 2, Week 8.
Food chain, food web, and energy levels. Matatag curriculum, bansang makabata, batang makabansa, with me, teacher KMT. Good day, kids! Today, we will learn about food chain, food web, and energy levels. Here are the possible objectives for today's lesson. Number 1. Draw a food chain and a food web using living things from the Philippines. Number 2. Label organisms in the food chain as herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. Number 3. Identify the relationships among the different trophic levels in a food chain. Number 4. Trace the flow of energy in an ecosystem. And number 5. Explain the effect of human activities on the balance in a food chain or food web. Short review. Analyze the 5 sets of animals to identify which one does not belong to the group. Cross out the word that has different food eaten.
Number 1. Dog, pig, bird, tiger.
Which one does not belong to the group? Very good, the tiger. Number 2. Pig, goat, horse, cow. Which one does not belong to the group? Good job, the pig. Number 3. Tiger, lion, cat, and elephant. Which one does not belong to the group? Correct, the elephant. Number 4. Lion, wolf, bear, eagle. Which one does not belong to the group? Good job, the bear. Number 5. Dugong, horse, deer, chicken. Which one does not belong to the group? Very good, the chicken. Breakfast meals. What did you have for breakfast today? What does eating breakfast do for our bodies? Where do you think the energy from the food come from? How does energy coming from the sun being transferred from one organism to another? Arrange the scrambled letters to form a meaningful word, then define each word. Now let us answer. Number 1 is producer. Number 2 is consumers. Number 3 is decomposer. Number 4 is food chain. Number 5 is food web. Here are their meanings. Number 1, producer is an organism like a plant that makes its own food using sunlight through a process called photosynthesis. Number 2, consumers are animals or organisms that eat plants or other animals for energy. Number 3, decomposer is an organism such as bacteria or fungi that breaks down dead plants and animals into simpler substances, recycling nutrients back into the ecosystem. Number 4, food chain is a sequence that shows how each living thing gets its food. For example, a plant is eaten by an insect, which is then eaten by a bird. Number 5, food web is a complex network of many interconnected food chains showing the feeding relationships between different organisms in an ecosystem. First lesson, food chain. A food chain is a simple way to show how energy moves from one living thing to another. The food chain consists of number 1, producers, or also known as plants. They make their own food using sunlight, water, and air through a process called photosynthesis. Number 2, primary consumers or herbivores. These are animals that eat plants. For example, a grasshopper eats grass. Number 3, secondary consumers or carnivores. These animals eat herbivores. For example, a frog eats a grasshopper. Number 4, tertiary consumers. They are animals that obtain their nutrition by eating primary consumers, or also known as herbivores, and secondary consumers, or also known as carnivores or omnivores. For example, a snake can eat a frog. Number 5, quaternary consumers or final consumers. They are the last ones to eat. Mostly, they are animals at the end of the food chain and are not eaten by anything else because they have limited predators. For example, a hawk can eat a snake. And number 6, decomposers. These organisms like fungi and bacteria break down dead plants and animals, returning nutrients to the soil which helps plants grow. For example, a dead hawk can slowly break down into pieces by fungi and bacteria. Each step shows who eats whom and how energy flows through the ecosystem. Work example. This work example is to be guided by your actual teacher. Why do we need to understand food chain? Good job! Understanding food chains helps us appreciate the interconnectedness of life and the importance of each species in maintaining ecological balance. Second lesson, food web. Analyze the given picture. Trace how many food chains are interconnected to each other. What are the different organisms you see in the image? Can you group them based on what they eat? For example, producers, consumers, decomposers. How many producers? How about herbivores? How about carnivores? Following the arrows, trace the path of energy from the sun to a top predator. What happens to the energy at each level? Decomposers are not explicitly shown in the image, but they play a crucial role. Why are they important for the food web and the overall ecosystem? Identify the food chains that compose the food web in the figure. What do you think will happen if there is an excessive hunting of snakes? What is the difference between a food chain and a food web? A food web is a complex network of interconnected food chains that illustrate the feeding relationships within an ecosystem. Unlike a simple food chain, which shows a linear path of energy transfer from one organism to another, a food web demonstrates how multiple food chains overlap and interact. In our previous lesson, we discussed that the grass will be eaten by a grasshopper. A grasshopper will be eaten by a frog. A frog will be eaten by a snake. A snake will be eaten by a hawk. And once the hawk is dead, it will decompose by fungi or bacteria, and this will help plants to grow. Another food chain will be a mouse can eat a grass, and an owl can eat the mouse. Similarly, a rabbit can eat grass, and a fox or a hawk can eat the rabbit. This is now what we call food web. It consists of multiple food chains. Work example. This work example is to be guided by your actual teacher. Lesson activity. This lesson activity is to be guided by your actual teacher. Take a look at the given criteria. How do human activities affect the balance in a food web? Great! When humans cut down trees, pollute water, or catch too many fish, it can disrupt the balance of a food web by making it harder for animals to find food and homes, which can harm the entire ecosystem. Third lesson, energy levels. This activity is to be guided by your actual teacher. In the context of food chains and food webs, Energy levels refers to the different positions organisms occupy based on how they obtain their energy. These positions are also known as trophic levels. The main trophic levels are as follows. Number 1, producers. Number 2, primary consumers. Number 3, secondary consumers. Number 4, tertiary consumers. And number 5, quaternary consumers or apex predators. In a food web, which is a more complex network of interconnected food chains, these energy levels still apply but are more interconnected and less linear. Each step up the trophic levels represents a transfer of energy, but only about 10% of the energy from one level is passed to the next. This is known as the 10% rule, and it limits the number of trophic levels an ecosystem can support. Work example: Philippine forest escapade. Scenario: in the Philippine forest, a Philippine eagle swoops down to catch a Philippine tarsier, while a reticulated python lurks nearby, eyeing a Philippine deer grazing on leaves, and a pitcher plant awaits its insect prey. Number 1. What are the organisms mentioned in the scenario? Make a trophic tower, then classify each organism into its respective trophic level, such as producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and more. Good job! The organisms mentioned in the scenario were Philippine eagle, Philippine tarsier, reticulated python, Philippine deer, and pitcher plant. Trophic level summary. Producers, pitcher plant. Primary consumers, Philippine deer. Secondary consumers, Philippine tarsier, pitcher plant when consuming insects. Tertiary consumers, reticulated python. Quaternary consumers, Philippine eagle. Number 2. Describe the flow of energy through the ecosystem based on the scenario. Explain how energy is transferred between trophic levels. Predict how much energy is transferred from one trophic level to the next. Let's answer. Flow of energy in the forest. Number 1. Plants. Pitcher plant. Plants get their energy from the sun. They make food using sunlight, which is the start of the energy flow. Number 2. Plant eaters or Philippine deer. The deer eats the plants and gets energy from them. This makes the deer a primary consumer. Number 3. Small animal eaters, Philippine tarsier. The tarsier eats insects and small animals, getting energy from them. This makes the tarsier a secondary consumer. Number 4. Big animal eaters, reticulated python. The python eats animals like the deer, getting energy from them. This makes the python a tertiary consumer. Number 5. Top predators, Philippine eagle. The eagle eats animals like the tarsier, getting energy from them. This makes the eagle a quaternary consumer or apex predator. Energy transfer. When the deer eats the plants, it gets about 10% of the energy from the plants. When the tarsier eats insects, it gets about 10% of the energy from the insects. When the python eats the deer, it gets about 10% of the energy from the deer. When the eagle eats the tarsier, it gets about 10% of the energy from the tarsier. So if a plant has 1,000 units of energy, the deer gets 100 units, the tarsier gets 10 units, the python gets 1 unit, and the eagle gets 0.1 units. Number 3. Imagine if there was a decrease in the population of Philippine deer due to the habitat loss. How will this affect the energy flow in the ecosystem? Good job! If there are fewer Philippine deer, there will be less food for animals that eat them, which can make it harder for those animals to survive and affect the whole food chain. Lesson activity. Who gets the leftovers? Read the following scenarios and answer the questions about energy transfer. Scenario number 1. A plant captures 100 units of energy from the sun through photosynthesis. A grasshopper eats the plant and gains 80 units of energy. What happens to the remaining 20 units of energy? Great! When the grasshopper eats the plant, it gets 80 units of energy. The remaining 20 units of energy are used up by the plant for its own growth and activities, or they are lost as heat. So the plant uses some energy to stay alive and grow, and some energy just goes away as heat. Scenario number 2.
A snake eats a lizard that has 1,000 units of energy.
The snake uses 60 units of its energy for breathing, moving, and digesting its food. How much energy does the snake have left for other activities or growth? Correct! If the snake eats a lizard with 1,000 units of energy and uses 60 units for breathing, moving, and digesting, it has 1,000 units minus 60 is equals to 940. So the snake has 940 units of energy left for other activities or growth. Kids, remember, in the given scenarios, the 10% rule is not directly shown because the scenarios given were just simplified examples to show how energy is used by animals. The 10% rule means that only about 10% of the energy from one level of the food chain is passed on to the next level, which is commonly seen in trophic levels. Additional activities. These additional activities are to be guided by your actual teacher. Learners' takeaways. This learner's takeaways is to be guided by your actual teacher. Reflection on learning. This reflection on learning is to be guided by your actual teacher. Evaluating learning. Read carefully the questions and choose the letter of the correct answer. Number 1. Which organism in the food chain below is a producer? Letter A, snake. Letter B, mouse. Letter C, rice. Letter D, eagle. What is the correct answer? Very good. The correct answer is letter C. Number 2. Which statement is true about the transfer of energy in the trophic levels? Letter A. If you eat organisms that feed on plants,
You will have the highest energy in the trophic levels.
Letter B. Only 10% of energy in an organism is transferred to the next trophic level. Letter C. The amount of energy transferred increases as it goes up the trophic level. Letter D. The transfer of energy from one trophic level to the next is very efficient. What is the correct answer? Great! The correct answer is letter B. Only 10% of energy in an organism is transferred to the next trophic level. Number 3. Which of the following is a correct food chain, producer to consumers? Letter A. Grass to snake to farm mouse.
Letter B. Snake to grass to farm mouse.
Letter C. Farm mouse to snake to grass. Letter D. Grass to caterpillar to bird. What is the correct answer? Good job! The correct answer is letter D. Grass to caterpillar to bird. Number 4. What is the other name for a primary consumer? Letter A. Autotroph. Letter B. Omnivore. Letter C. Herbivore. Or letter D. Carnivore. What is the correct answer? Good job! The correct answer is letter C. Herbivore. Number 5. Where can you find the predator in the energy pyramid? Letter A, third level. Letter B, middle. Letter C, apex. Letter D, base. What is the correct answer? Great! The correct answer is letter C, apex. Evaluating learning. This another evaluation learning is to be guided by your actual teacher. Well done, kids! What have we learned today? Today, we learn about a food chain is a simple way to show how energy moves from one living thing to another. We learned that a food chain consists of producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, final consumer, and decomposer. While a food web is a complex network of interconnected food chains that illustrate the feeding relationships within an ecosystem. Unlike a simple food chain, which shows a linear path of energy transfer from one organism to another, a food web demonstrates how multiple food chains overlap and interact. In the context of food chains and food webs, energy levels refer to the different positions organisms occupy based on how they obtain their energy. These positions are also known as trophic levels. The main trophic levels are number 1, producers, number 2, primary consumers, number 3, secondary consumers, number 4, tertiary consumers, and number 5, quaternary consumers or apex predators. Kids, thank you for listening. I hope you have learned. Do not forget to click the like, share, and subscribe.